A while ago, I made a video taking a look at some of the dinosaur movies that were never made. Since then, I've learned about a handful more of dinosaur movies that never came to fruition that I wanted to talk about today. The film industry has never been an easy one, because there are so many obstacles to face in just getting said idea off the ground. Whether it was budget issues, creative differences, or maybe some unknown reason, these few movies that I'm going to be covering today have unfortunately never seen the light of day. Let's go ahead and take a look at what could have been. Okay, so I've actually already talked about this movie, which is why it's first on the list. Given this is a video talking about dinosaur movies that were never made, I felt that it was only fitting to at least include it and briefly talk about it. If you don't know what Dinosaurs Vs Aliens is, it started out as a graphic novel back in 2012 made by Grant Morrison and Barry Sonnenfeld, which seemed like the start of a potential franchise as its release was labeled as Volume 1, indicating that there was more to come. On top of that, it was also confirmed that a movie trilogy was being made for it as well. Obviously, this never happened, but on top of the movie silently getting cancelled, the graphic novel was also abandoned for unknown reasons, and for a decade after that, the Dinosaurs vs. Aliens IP was dormant. Until one day, the creators came back with a massive update. A film was once again in the works, only this time under an NFT company. Which, I mean, given the understandable animosity against NFTs, this wasn't great news for the fans of Dinosaurs vs. Aliens. If I were to guess what the idea was going to be with the involvement of NFTs, they were probably going to release certain assets alongside the release of the film that probably would have expanded the story, or maybe would have just been items of sorts from the movie. Regardless, it wouldn't matter that much, because months would go by and no updates were made about the planned movie until June of this year, when it was revealed that the movie was once again cancelled, and instead the Dinosaurs vs. Aliens IP is being turned into an NFT game. Why the creators are so insistent to push their IP towards the direction of NFTs, even though they had a well-established fan base that liked it just the way it was before they made these weird NFT decisions, is beyond me. Rulers of the Apocalypse was going to be a low-budget dinosaur horror movie that was going to be made by indie movie director and writer Warren F. Disbrow. There's not much I could find about this movie in terms of what it was going to be about, but one source gives out this little description of the film. It contained all of the ingredients for a surefire success. Serious social issues such as spousal abuse dealt with in post-apocalyptic America by a hero who's being targeted for death by his former employer, the FBI. Oh yes, it also contains dinosaurs. Lots of dinosaurs. Lots and lots of dinosaurs. Disbrow was hoping to branch away from the more family-friendly dinosaur films that had been made during his time by making something much more violent and horror-oriented. Along with that, he was also planning to bring all of the dinosaurs to life using nothing but practical effects. Disbrow really appreciates the use of practical effects in movies that he's grown attached to, which had inspired him to continue using that method for all of his own films regardless of the small budget. It's clear just reading through his blog site that Disbrow has a disdain towards CGI, saying in one post, "I love monsters, and to me the best monsters were not CGI. I think CGI has ruined a lot of movies that would have been much better with intelligently executed physical effects. CGI will eventually replace actors and physical effects people, but right now they often look like slick video game junk, not very convincing on screen." Going back to him wanting to use practical effects, another source of inspiration that fueled him to carry on this method for film was the fact that his father actually made several full-sized radio-controlled dinosaur animatronics when he was a kid. According to Disbrow, "My father made the full-sized dinosaur puppets out of aluminum like huge toys with motor-driven legs and cable-controlled neck, head, and jaw movements. He also got the eyes working. My contribution was to draw on several tapped-together poster boards the shape I wanted them to be so he could bend the metal to it. I also sculpted dinosaur skin and the heads and eyes. My skin was used to cover his beautiful metal dinosaur skeletons." So when he finally came around for the idea of Rulers of the Apocalypse. Disbrow's plan was to use these dinosaur animatronics for the movie, which, based on the pictures he provides on his site, included various types of theropod dinosaurs like Dilophosaurus, a weird-looking Spinosaurus of some kind, and a few others that are kind of hard to tell since I'm sure he was just going for a dinosaur carnivore archetype rather than trying to make them completely distinguishable. But according to the dinosaur filmography, some of the other prehistoric creatures that were going to be included were Tyrannosaurus rex, Baryonyx, and a Tylosaurus. It's not specified how much money Disbrow was working with, but he does say in his site that he made the decision to shoot the movie on Super 16mm film, which he ended up regretting because even though most things were being shot in Super 16 during that point in time, it wasn't very cost efficient. He even admits that had he shot the movie on video, Rulers of the Apocalypse would have been finished and out already. But since he decided against it, he ended up stopping the production of his movie. I started shooting and we shot for a number of weeks before I pulled the plug on the movie. It was the only time I could remember I didn't complete something I started. Rulers would have been finished if I had shot it on video, but instead I ended up with maybe 15 minutes of acting and action scenes featuring the dinosaurs. He does go on to say that he plans to raise the funds so that he can continue making his movie properly, but to my knowledge, he started making this film during the mid-90s, and according to Internet Archive, this post was made in 2006. In other words, Rulers of the Apocalypse is still dormant, and will probably stay that way for a while if it ever gets made at all. In 2002, Canadian actor Adam Beach announced that a live-action Turok film was in the works. Not much was said. Beach's words were, "There's a new Turok where he's a college student. His uncle has died, and he learns about the responsibilities of a Turok and jumps into it when his family is threatened. A Turok is a warrior who is the protector of Earth from other dimensions. It's a place called the Lost World, and in that Lost World, they're trying to defeat the one enemy who wants to consume all of the worlds. Turok is the warrior on Earth who is fighting these people. His duty is to get these dinosaur beings and send them back to their own worlds." In a more recent interview with the site called The Movie Sleuths, Beach would add on saying that after starring in the 2002 movie Windtalkers, directed by John Woo, Woo would approach Beach with the idea of possibly shooting a live-action Turok film, which Beach was 100% on board for. We ended up getting all the people that owned the rights to Turok. My buddy Hayden Christensen jumped on board. We got investors, we got our writer. That first writer failed to put together a script. I went into my little basement to hack out a new script idea. But unfortunately, not much would come of this. That is, until 2008. 2008 seemed like the year for Turok. It was the year the Turok video game for PS3 and Xbox 360 was released, and the year the animated movie Turok Son of Stone would also be released. And it was the year a live-action Turok film was re-announced to be in the works. During an exclusive interview with MTV, Adam Beach, who actually contributed in a voice role for the animated Turok Son of Stone movie, would again announce, "We just finished the animated movie, and now we're going into the feature film movie, which should lens hopefully in a couple of years. We're about to set up meetings to develop a script and put it out there. I'll have to beef up and be a good guy and save the world." Beach's enthusiasm for the movie comes from the fact that Turok was the first Native American hero he ever looked up to. So to get a chance to play as him in a live-action film was a dream come true. And considering Beach is of Saulteaux descent, he had already voiced Turok in the animated movie, and he was familiar with the character prior to the role, it seemed like a very fitting choice. Along with that, from what's been stated at this point in time, it seemed like the Turok movie was still early in its development, and it would still be a few years until anyone saw anything from it. It was also speculated that maybe this film was going to follow in the footsteps of its animated counterpart, in that it was going to be based off the original comics rather than any of the games, which from my understanding follow their own continuities that are only loosely connected to the comics. Based on the sources I read that covered this, the Turok movie possibly being based off of one of the games was a concern, because even though the Turok game games are fun and for the most part well remembered, film adaptations of video games were known to be pretty awful. But it's hard to tell what they were going for this film, especially since nothing would end up coming from it. Going back to that interview with the movie sleuths, Beach concludes his segment on Turok basically saying that there were creative differences for approaching his role in the film, which would cause the investors to back out from the project. John wanted me to be the guy leading the force, and they didn't want that. And then it just all fell apart. We just couldn't pick up the pieces again, so I'm hoping that one of these years I'll get back to it and write a killer script that everyone can work on. I think this was referring back to the 2002 attempt to make the Turok film, but regardless, the result was the same. The Turok movie would get cancelled and unfortunately would not get to see the light of day. So Dino-Warps is a pretty obscure title, to the point where there's really no online reference to it. The only place I was able to find it mentioned was the Dinosaur filmography. Apparently, sometime during the 90s, there was a movie in the works called Dino-Warp that involved Brett Piper for the screenplay, who I've mentioned before when I briefly talked about a nymphoid barbarian in Dinosaur Hell in my Dinosaur Iceberg video. Piper had been a part of several B-movie projects over the years as a director, a writer, and even a special effects worker. So I can only assume this movie was going to be along the lines of his previous works that include things like Dinosaur Babes, Guerrilla Warfare, Battle of the Apes, and who could forget the ultimate classic, Among Us. All jokes aside, the premise for Dino-Warp sounds pretty intriguing. According to the Dinosaur filmography, a deputy sheriff and a woman lawyer investigating reports of dinosaurs killing cows stumble into a top-secret military time travel experiment and soon find themselves battling prehistoric beasts both in the Jurassic and today. The name of the studio attached to this film was Kinetic Image Company Limited, but looking up that name doesn't really give me anything, so I'm assuming that anything relating to this movie that was once on the internet is now defunct and lost to time. Luckily, the author for the Dinosaur filmography managed to jot down the movie's tagline, which says, "Government scientists release prehistoric monsters on a helpless world." Cool. Yeah, very, very cool. Lots of innocent people dying. Very cool. Death and destruction. Very cool. It also says the deputy uses a piece of earth-moving equipment to fight against the dinosaurs, but unfortunately loses the fight in a sudden twist of events. And as far as the dinosaur content goes, the only specified dinosaur that was going to be featured was Allosaurus. But there was also some indication that there were going to be other prehistoric creatures. With how much little information there was out there for it, I decided to reach out to Brett Piper myself to see if he could provide me with anything else on Dino-Warp. And he ended up responding to me saying Dino-Warp was written on spec for a company in Vermont. They pitched it to their distributors in LA who turned it down, claiming there was no audience for dinosaur movies. He goes on to tell me that this was around the same time Jurassic Park was in production. So it looks like they kind of just completely misjudged the atmosphere there. That, or they took the route that many people who were working on dinosaur films took during this point in time and just canceled them simply because they were intimidated by the competition of Jurassic Park. I proceeded to ask Piper what he remembered from the plot and the dinosaurs for the film. It was from a long time ago, so based off of memory, Piper explains a bit more about the time travel plot for the movie. The plot had to do with some secret government project to use time travel as a weapon. As a sort of byproduct, dinosaurs had been brought back to contemporary times and were kept hidden in a sort of Saurian Area 51. He goes on to say the dinosaurs he was sure were going to show up were Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops, or at least something similar to those. The description from the Dinosaur filmography did say the dinosaurs were from the Jurassic period and was going to feature an Allosaurus, but again, this was from a long time ago, and from a film that probably didn't make it too far into development anyway, or at all. So there's bound to be some misremembering. But he does remember that there was going to be a sequence where our main characters would be sent back in time and have to survive in the past, where a bunch of other dinosaurs would be featured. And one thing is for sure, Piper confirmed that stop-motion animation would have been used to bring the dinosaurs to life for this movie. Huge thanks to Brett Piper for providing me with all of this information. Also, I don't want to brag or anything, but he did say that he did watch a few of my videos before and he enjoyed them. So I don't know, that's always nice to hear and I love that. Thank you so much, Mr. Piper. It's a shame this movie never came to fruition because even if it was more on the low budget side, it just sounds hella fun. Back in 1990, there were plans to make another film adaptation to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's book, The Lost World, which, if you don't know, is about a group of people that go on an expedition to South America to prove that dinosaurs are still alive on a secluded plateau. It's weird because this one's also a bit of an obscure one, which is a bit of a surprise considering all that were apparently a part of the project. John Landis was set to direct the film, Richard Matheson was going to be a scriptwriter for it, and Sean Connery was cast as Professor Challenger. According to Landis, the film was going to be a traditional, old-fashioned adaptation, which I'm assuming meant the movie was going to stick somewhat close to the source material, which contained all sorts of prehistoric wildlife, including pterosaurs, prehistoric mammalian animals, various dinosaurs, and so on. At this point, there had already been a few adaptations to The Lost World, but the idea of a traditional adaptation, especially one that was going to take place in 1990, seemed pretty promising. However, Landis confirms that this movie ended up becoming a no-go. Unfortunately, it was in development at Universal, and when they brought Jurassic Park, they said, "We don't want to do The Lost World." Unfortunately, that's pretty much the extent of what's known about this specific adaptation. I'm assuming if this is all the information that's out about it, then they probably just didn't get far into development at all. Gotta say though, Sean Connery as Professor Challenger would have been so cool. There's just something about him that feels very fitting for the role. As far as another adaptation for The Lost World, there's been lots of them already. It wouldn't be at the top of my list for something I'd want to see from a dinosaur movie, but I also wouldn't say no to it, especially seeing how newer technology and depictions of dinosaurs can bring something new and fun to the table for another film adaptation of it. And there you go, more dinosaur movies that were never made. If you guys made it this far into the video, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. It's always fun covering not just paleo media, but paleo media that never was. If you guys have any more suggestions for dinosaur movies that were never made, leave them in the comments down below. Just looking through my available sources, I know there are tons more examples, so this will probably just be a recurring series that I'll come back to every now and again. Of course, given my upload rate, you probably won't see another one for about a year or so. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and please have a nice day.